The CEO's face turned white when he saw me walk through those doors. 6 months earlier, they'd escorted me out like a criminal for causing panic. Now their stock had plummeted 70%, and they were begging me to come back and fix what I'd predicted all along. My name is Matthias Chen, and for nearly a decade, I was the Risk Assessment Director at Horizon Technologies, one of Silicon Valley's darlings that went from startup to tech giant in record time. Cybersecurity wasn't just my job, it was my calling. 15 years spent hunting vulnerabilities, building impenetrable systems, and protecting digital fortresses had earned me a reputation as the guy who saw dangers before they materialized. My colleagues used to joke that I had a sixth sense for detecting threats, but the truth was simpler. I just paid attention to what others were too busy to see. I still remember the day I first walked into Horizon's glass-walled headquarters, back when we were just 50 people with big dreams and bigger monitors. The founder, Alex Morgan, hired me personally, looking me straight in the eyes and saying, "I don't want yes men. I want someone who'll tell me when we're about to drive off a cliff." Those words became my North Star. For years, we built a culture where caution wasn't the enemy of innovation, but its guardian. We grew steadily, carefully, earning the trust of millions of users who believed their data was safe in our hands. Everything changed the day venture capital firm Pinnacle Partners bought a controlling stake in the company. Alex cashed out, sailing away on his yacht, while the rest of us faced a storm that would reshape everything. I'll never forget that first executive meeting with our new overlords, the sleek suits, the PowerPoint presentations, dripping with aggressive growth projections, the cold calculation in their eyes as they spoke about acceptable risk thresholds, like they were discussing the weather. Their leader, Richard Voss, had a reputation for turning companies into profit machines, often by cutting corners that shouldn't be cut. "Prevention is expensive," he announced during that first meeting, slamming his fist on the polished conference table so hard my coffee splashed onto my notebook. "We need to move fast and fix things later, if necessary." The room fell silent as his words hung in the air, directly challenging everything we'd built. I felt a knot forming in my stomach as I looked around at my colleagues, seeing resignation already settling into their expressions. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, my wife watching with concerned eyes as I tried to articulate what felt so wrong. "They don't understand what we're protecting," I told her, my voice cracking with emotion. "These aren't just numbers in a database. They're people's lives, their secrets, their financial security." She placed her hand on mine, her touch grounding me. "Then make them understand, Matthias. That's your job." The following weeks became a silent war. Every security protocol I'd established was questioned. Every safeguard scrutinized for its return on investment. Team meetings that once focused on strengthening our defenses now revolved around speed and feature deployment. I watched helplessly as my security team was cut in half, the remaining members pushed to the brink with impossible deadlines and diminishing resources. When I raised concerns, Richard would fix me with that shark-like smile and say, "That's why we have insurance, Chen. Stop being such a pessimist." The tension between us grew palpable. In meetings, his eyes would narrow whenever I spoke, his fingers drumming impatiently on the table. Other executives began avoiding me in the hallways, sensing I'd become persona non grata. My warnings were met with eye rolls and whispers. "There goes Chen again, predicting the apocalypse." But I couldn't stop. Not when I could see the cracks forming in our infrastructure, widening with each rushed update and bypassed security check. It wasn't a question of if disaster would strike, but when and how catastrophic it would be when it did. It was a Tuesday morning when I found it, the vulnerability that made my blood run cold. I'd been running routine security checks, diving deeper than usual into our newest API integration, when a pattern caught my eye. A backdoor so subtle yet so devastating it could give attackers unfettered access to our entire customer database. Millions of users, billions of data points, all of it exposed like an open wound. My hands trembled as I verified my findings, triple-checking every line of code until there was no denying what I'd discovered. I called an emergency meeting with the executive team, preparing a comprehensive presentation overnight. Sleep-deprived but laser-focused, I walked into that boardroom ready for battle. The faces around the table ranged from bored to annoyed as I connected my laptop to the projector. "This better be important, Chen," Richard sighed, checking his watch pointedly. "We have a product launch in 3 weeks." "It won't matter if we launch," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Not if we don't fix this first." The slides I presented painted a horrifying picture. A vulnerability that could compromise every piece of personal information our users had trusted us with. Names, addresses, financial data, even the private messages they believed were secure. I laid out an action plan. Delay the launch by 2 weeks, reallocate resources to patch the vulnerability, and conduct a thorough security audit. The silence that followed should have been contemplative. Instead, it was threatening. Richard leaned forward, his knuckles white against the polished table. "Are you seriously suggesting we delay our biggest launch of the year because of some hypothetical threat?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "It's not hypothetical," I insisted, heat rising to my face. "I've run the simulations. The risk is—" "The risk," he cut me off, standing now, "is letting fearmongers like you dictate our business strategy." He turned to the rest of the team. "Chen here would have us pass up a $200 million opportunity because he's found another bogeyman under the bed." Something inside me snapped. Years of building respect, of careful diplomacy, evaporated in an instant. I slammed my palm on the table, making water glasses jump. "These aren't bogeymen," I shouted, pointing at my findings on the screen. "This is real, and if we ignore it, people will get hurt." Richard's face darkened as he circled the table toward me. The other executives shrank back, no one daring to intervene. He stopped inches from me, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. "You're done scaremongering in my company," he hissed. "It's not your company," I shot back. "It belongs to the people who trust us with their data." The slap came out of nowhere, an open palm across my face that echoed in the silent room. The shock of it froze me more than the sting. In 15 years of corporate life, I'd never been physically struck. Richard's eyes widened slightly, perhaps surprised by his own action, but he didn't back down. "Security alert," I said quietly, touching my cheek. "I've just identified the biggest threat to this company, and he's standing right in front of me." 2 hours later, I was sitting in HR, listening to corporate doublespeak about cultural fit and alignment with company values. My access was revoked before I even returned to my desk. Security, ironically, the team I had built, escorted me through the open office floor, past the shocked faces of colleagues I'd worked alongside for years. No one spoke. No one met my eyes. I was handed a cardboard box with personal items from my desk, my company phone already wiped, my badge deactivated. As the glass doors closed behind me, I stood in the California sunshine, suddenly untethered. Through the transparent walls, I could see Richard watching from the upper floor, his expression triumphant. I held his gaze for a long moment before turning away, a strange calm settling over me despite everything. They would realize their mistake eventually. I just hoped it wouldn't cost too many innocent people their security, their privacy, their trust. But deep down, I knew better. The clock was already ticking toward disaster. 63 days. That's how long it took for my worst fears to materialize. I was in my home office, the space I'd converted into a makeshift command center after my termination. Job offers had come in, competitors eager to poach Horizon's former security chief, but I'd turned them all down, haunted by unfinished business. Instead, I'd been meticulously documenting the vulnerability I'd discovered, watching Horizon's updates for any sign they were addressing it. They weren't. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking! Massive data breach at Horizon Technologies. Exposes millions. The article loaded with agonizing slowness, each word confirming what I'd predicted. The exact vulnerability I'd warned about had been exploited. User data was flooding onto the dark web. Credit card information, addresses, private messages, even health data from their wellness integration. My stomach knotted as I imagined the real human cost behind these statistics. Identities stolen, finances ruined, lives upended. I didn't sleep for the next 3 days. I watched Horizon's stock plummet 70% in a single trading session. Watched their damage control press conferences, where Richard fumbled through prepared statements about sophisticated attacks and unprecedented breaches. Watched as users fled the platform in droves and class action lawsuits piled up. The company I'd helped build was imploding. My phone rang constantly. Journalists seeking comment, former colleagues looking for explanations, lawyers offering to represent me if I wanted to go public with what I knew. I answered none of them. This wasn't a moment for "I told you so." This was a tragedy, one I had failed to prevent despite my best efforts. On the 4th day, something shifted inside me. I was standing in my kitchen, staring at my reflection in the microwave door, when my wife placed her hand on my shoulder. "They didn't listen," she said softly. "That's on them, not you." Her words broke something loose. The paralysis of the past months dissolved, replaced by a clarity I hadn't felt since before my firing. I turned and hugged her tightly, whispering, "You're right." And others might listen. That night, I registered a domain name and built a simple website. Not to attack Horizon, but to offer something constructive. Detailed security guidance for small and medium businesses who couldn't afford massive security teams. I published comprehensive, accessible articles on the exact kind of vulnerabilities I'd seen exploited. Within a week, my inbox was flooded with messages from grateful CTOs and founders who'd implemented my recommendations. A small consulting job came in, then another. I began working with startups that valued security but lacked expertise. Unlike the corporate giants, they listened hungrily to my warnings, implementing changes immediately. For the first time in my career, I was preventing disasters before they happened, not just predicting them. My client list grew through word of mouth alone, each success story building my reputation anew, not as a whistleblower, but as a builder of secure systems. 3 months into this new chapter, I received a call from Sandra Ramirez, a former colleague from Horizon, who had resigned in the wake of the breach. "I'm with TrustGuard now," she said, naming one of the most respected cybersecurity firms in the industry. "We're putting together a response team to help companies recover from breaches like Horizon's. Your name keeps coming up." The offer was more than generous. A leadership position, resources to build the kind of security infrastructure I'd always envisioned. I accepted on one condition: I would maintain my independent consulting for smaller clients who couldn't afford enterprise-level security. The day I signed my contract with TrustGuard, a profile of me appeared in Tech Insider. From Cassandra to Kingmaker, how one security expert's warnings went unheeded, and how he's rebuilding trust in tech. The article detailed my journey without sensationalism, focusing on the lessons learned and the path forward. It ended with a quote from me that encapsulated my transformation. "Security isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the most persistent, even when, especially when, no one wants to listen." As the article gained traction, my inbox filled again, this time with messages from Horizon employees, past and present. "You were right," they wrote. "We should have listened." Each message was a bittersweet vindication. I hadn't wanted to be right. I had wanted to be heard. I framed one message in particular, hanging it above my desk as both reminder and motivation. It was from a junior developer at Horizon who had tried to raise concerns after my departure and been similarly silenced. "You showed me that standing alone for what's right is better than standing together for what's wrong," he wrote. "I resigned yesterday, starting my own security consultancy next month. Thank you for showing the way." This was the real victory. Not watching Horizon crumble, but watching a new generation of security advocates rise, determined not to repeat the same mistakes. My vindication wasn't in Horizon's downfall, but in the industry's awakening to the importance of what I'd been fighting for all along. The call came on a rain-soaked Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after my unceremonious exit from Horizon Technologies. An unfamiliar number with the company's area code. I let it ring 3 times, debating whether to answer, before curiosity won out. "Mr. Chen," a woman's voice said, formal and strained. "This is Catherine Reynolds, chairperson of the Horizon Technologies Board of Directors." I said nothing, letting the silence expand between us. She cleared her throat. "We'd like to schedule a meeting with you at your earliest convenience." I almost laughed. After everything, the humiliation, the vindication, the rebuilding, they wanted a meeting. "May I ask what this concerns?" I kept my voice neutral, though my heart was racing. "The board feels this is best discussed in person," she replied, a diplomatic non-answer that told me everything I needed to know. They were desperate. 2 days later, I walked through the glass doors of Horizon headquarters, the same doors I'd been escorted through a year earlier with my belongings in a cardboard box. The lobby had changed. Gone were the flashy displays showcasing their products, replaced by understated decor that whispered of a company trying to rebuild trust. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly when I gave my name. I was led to the executive floor, into a conference room where 5 people waited. Catherine Reynolds, 3 board members I didn't recognize, and Richard Voss himself. He looked like a shadow of the man who had struck me. Thinner, grayer, the arrogance drained from his posture. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Chen," Catherine began, gesturing to a chair directly across from Richard. A power move, forcing us to face each other. I remained standing. "I prefer to stand," I said quietly. "Last time I was in a room like this, things got physical." Richard flinched visibly. Catherine's eyes narrowed, darting between us. "We've asked you here today because Horizon Technologies is at a crossroads," she said. "The breach has cost us dearly, not just financially, but in public trust. Which is why Richard will be stepping down as CEO, effective immediately," one of the other board members interjected. Richard's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. This wasn't news to him. Catherine slid a folder across the table toward me. "We want you back, Matthias, as Chief Security Officer, reporting directly to the board. Full autonomy over security protocols, double your previous salary, and a seat at the executive table." She paused, letting the offer hang in the air. "We need someone the public trusts to right this ship." I opened the folder, skimming the contract without truly reading it. The numbers were impressive. Desperation quantified in dollars and stock options. I closed it and looked directly at Richard for the first time. "Do you have anything to say?" The room went silent. Richard's face contorted, pride wrestling with necessity. Finally he stood, extended his hand across the table. "I was wrong," he said, each word seemingly pulled from him with pliers. "You tried to warn us, and I should have listened." I looked at his outstretched hand, remembering the sting of his palm against my face, the humiliation of being escorted out, the vindication that came too late for millions of affected users. So many possible responses ran through my mind. Walking out, accepting with conditions, even the perfect cutting remark that would leave him as hollowed out as he'd once left me. Instead, I surprised myself by taking his hand briefly. Not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement of a battle that had moved beyond personal grudges. "Thank you for saying that," I said simply. Turning to Catherine, I handed the folder back. "I won't be returning to Horizon." Her composed facade cracked. "We're prepared to negotiate on any terms." "This isn't about terms," I interrupted gently. "What happened at Horizon wasn't just about one vulnerability or one CEO's decision. It was about a culture that valued speed over safety, profits over people." I gestured around the room. "That culture doesn't change with one new hire, even at the executive level." I reached into my bag and pulled out a different folder. "However, my consulting firm is willing to work with Horizon on rebuilding your security infrastructure. These are our terms. They include a complete security overhaul, mandatory board training on cybersecurity risks, and the establishment of an independent security advocacy group within the company." They exchanged glances, clearly blindsided by this turn. "Your rates are significant," Catherine noted, scanning the document. "So was the cost of ignoring the last advice I gave you," I replied, without heat. "Consider it an investment in never having that conversation again." After a tense moment, Catherine nodded. "We'll review these terms and respond within 24 hours. As I turned to leave, Richard called after me, his voice hollow. Was there any way I could have prevented this? The question wasn't just about the breach, but about his own downfall, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale in business schools. I paused at the door. "You could have listened," I said simply. "Not just to me, but to everyone whose job it was to protect what you were building." I looked around at the board members. "That advice is free, by the way. Everything else will be billed at the rates in that folder." Walking out of Horizon that day felt nothing like my exit a year earlier. This time, I left on my terms, head high, future secure. The company car that had brought me there waited to take me back to my office, where my team was finalizing security protocols for 3 new clients, former Horizon customers who had jumped ship after the breach. My phone buzzed with a text from my wife. "How did it go?" I smiled as I typed my response. "Better than revenge." They needed saving from themselves, and I gave them the chance. On my terms. That evening, as I worked late in my office, a news alert popped up on my screen. Horizon Technologies announces major security overhaul, partners with industry-leading consultant. The stock had ticked up 7% on the news. Not redemption, that would take years of rebuilt trust, but a beginning. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the wall where I'd hung the framed message from that young developer who had followed in my footsteps. Below it, I'd added a simple phrase that had become something of a mantra in my new company. "Stand your ground. The earth will catch up eventually." The crisis I had warned about had indeed hit Horizon with devastating force. But from those ashes, something stronger was emerging, not just for me, but for an industry that had too often treated security as an afterthought. Sometimes being right isn't enough. Sometimes you have to be right, then wait, then return, not with "I told you so," but with "here's how we fix this." That's not revenge. That's revolution.